It was a really busy weekend for head coach Klint Kubiak as he's putting together his coaching staff. We'll talk about that plus more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for February 16th, 2026.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. We're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the fact that this show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support and the great job that my man Ari does on the daily, behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good on the YouTube page. So we shout out Ari. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit him up there. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. As you can imagine, a lot of calls, a lot of texts, great feedback, talking all things silver and black when it comes to Klint Kubiak, coaching staff, and a lot more. Max Crosby obviously is a conversation piece as well. So we'll get to as many calls and texts as we can, closing out the show, segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about a coach that's going to be on Klint Kubiak's coaching staff, a guy that was on the current staff and is going to be retained and promoted, and that's defensive coordinator Robbie Leonard, who was the defensive line coach, but as I said, defensive coordinator as he has been promoted into that position. So I'll tell you why I think that that's a really good move for Klint Kubiak, and also the opportunity that Robbie Leonard has moving forward. We'll do that in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, we'll just get you up to speed on all the coaches that have been put in place so far by head coach Klint Kubiak. We'll do that as soon as I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Robbie Leonard's the guy that we're going to talk about in segment number 2. He is now the defensive coordinator. He was the run game coordinator, defensive line coach. The team announced it on Sunday that he is going to be the defensive coordinator. He's been a defensive line coach with the Raiders since 2023. And then they're also retaining Joe Woods as a defensive pass game coordinator, sources told ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. But there you go. We didn't know who was going to be the defensive coordinator. There was a few different guys that the Raiders had brought in to interview, and ultimately they decided to go with the guy they interviewed off top, which was Robbie Leonard, and again, a guy that I'll talk about in great detail coming up in segment number 2, but pretty excited about the opportunity that Robbie Leonard has moving forward. So Leonard is the DC, Joe Woods, defensive pass game coordinator. Secondary coach, Matt Robinson. This was pretty interesting how this one came about. Not just the fact that he got hired, but the way, like I said, he ended up making his way to Las Vegas. Adam Schefter tweeted out, another change. Giants assistant defensive line coach, Matt Robinson, who left his job as Baltimore's outside linebackers coach this offseason to go to New York, is now going to the Raiders as their secondary coach per source. The Giants gave their permission and supported Robinson's move. So check this out. So Robinson is in Baltimore, right? Baltimore is where John Harbaugh was until he got fired. So then he leaves Baltimore, and he's going to New York to be with the Giants and with John Harbaugh again. So a coach that he's very familiar with, a coach that he just coached with, he was going to go there and be the defensive line coach, the assistant defensive line coach. And instead, Klint Kubiak approaches him about being the secondary coach for the Raiders, and the Giants don't stop him. They don't block him from having that opportunity to go, and he decides to go. So that I thought that was a cool little tip of the cap by Klint Kubiak to recognize a guy that has a lot of coaching talent. A guy that comes from Baltimore, where Mike Macdonald came from. And this is the thing about going back to even Robbie Leonard. We could talk about it in segment number 2. But Robbie Leonard coached under Mike Macdonald. Robbie Leonard coached under Brian Flores. So if you're getting another guy that was in Baltimore with Mike Macdonald, you can start to see how the pieces are going to be put together for this Raiders defense. Now, I'm not saying that's what it's going to be. The Seattle Seahawks defense that you see that just helped win the Super Bowl, I'm not saying they're going to be that right away, but you can see where the influences come from. So Matt Robinson now is the secondary coach for the Silver and Black. One that we thought was going to happen, and it did end up happening, was the Raiders hiring their offensive coordinator, Andrew Janocko. This came out from Adam Schefter as well on Sunday. The Raiders have hired Seattle Seahawks quarterback coach Andrew Janocko as offensive coordinator. Janocko will once again reunite with the first-time head coach Klint Kubiak, whom he worked with in Seattle, New Orleans, and Minnesota. Janocko was also a candidate for the same title in Seattle as Kubiak's successor. So that was one that we all kind of thought was going to happen. Like, that's going to be a no-brainer. He's going to end up going with Kubiak because he's been there every step of the way. But the only wrinkle was that Mike Macdonald was trying to interview him at least to be the OC and be the play caller there in Seattle. And he had about 4 different in-house guys that he was interviewing for the offensive coordinator job, but he ended up going outside of the building and hiring the 49ers, one of the 49ers assistant coaches, to be the offensive coordinator. Matter of fact, their tight end coach is now the Seattle Seahawks OC. So as soon as I saw the 49ers tight end coach going, I knew Janocko was a no-brainer. And it was about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes after it was announced who the Seahawks OC was going to be, that it was announced that Janocko was in Vegas and finalizing a deal. The Raiders actually made that official on Sunday. They put out an email and everything about Janocko, but that's important just because of the continuity, right? Klint Kubiak and Janocko have worked together for a very long time. He'll be the OC. Obviously, Klint Kubiak's going to be calling the plays, right? But they work very closely together. So I think that continuity is really important. So now you've got Rob Leonard as the DC. You got Matt Robinson as the secondary coach. You got Janocko as the OC. You got Joe Woods as the defensive pass game coordinator and also special teams coordinator. Found this out over the weekend as well. Joe DeCamillis. The Raiders are expected to hire South Carolina's Joe DeCamillis as special teams coordinator. Before South Carolina and working at Texas in 2023, DeCamillis was a special teams coach in the NFL for 31 years. So this is a guy that's been there, done that for a very long time. He's got a lot of skins on the wall as far as special teams coordinator. I think that he's going to be a really good one. It's good to see him be back, in the NFL, and he's a guy that gives it to you raw and uncut, right? He's one of those guys that is not afraid to tell you how he feels. He's one of those guys that if you listen to the press conference that Klint Kubiak had when he was introduced to the media and to Raider Nation, he said, we need coaches that are going to have no problem, ripping guys a new one if they're not doing their job. Well, guess what? Joe DeCamillis, he's that guy. He doesn't mind ripping the media a new one. He doesn't mind ripping the players a new one. And like I said, he's been around for a very long time in the NFL in general. The funny thing is, it's really a youth movement when you look at the coaches that the Raiders have hired, right? Klint Kubiak's 38. Andrew Janocko is 37. Robbie Leonard is 38. DeCamillis has coached in the NFL 31 years. So he's almost been coaching in the NFL as long as these guys have been alive. Right? So he's got plenty of experience. He's got plenty of skins on the wall. I think he'll do some really good things for the special teams unit for the Silver and Black. Obviously, none of these coaches matter if they don't have the right personnel. We know that. But it's good to see some guys that I believe are some really good coaches. And, look, we'll talk about Robbie Leonard coming up in segment number 2. He's a first-time DC. So there's probably going to be some growing pains. Klint Kubiak, first-time head coach, probably be some growing pains. But I do think they have an opportunity to grow together a relatively young team. And, again, what the goal is to sustain success. If they can sustain success and all of a sudden become a team that's, fighting each and every year for the playoffs, they can all grow together. I think that's a heck of a way to go. The one person that hasn't been announced yet, the one coach that hasn't been hired yet, offensive line coach. That is going to be critical. That is going to be so important. You've got to get one that's a really good coach, a really good teacher, a guy that can explain what he needs, obviously, and set the personnel up for success. The offensive line coach is going to be critical. And no, it's not going to be John Benton, who's in Seattle. He's staying in Seattle. Mike McDonald is not letting him go, so he's going to be the offensive line coach there in Seattle. So the Raiders have to find, and Klint Kubiak has to find their offensive line coach. I'm sure that's going to be the hire that will get announced sooner rather than later. But let's focus in on the defensive coordinator, Robbie Leonard. He gets a promotion from being the run game coordinator and defensive line coach to being the guy who's in charge, the DC. We'll talk about him coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors we have here on the show, and the first one is Zocdoc. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's in-network, nearby, has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, make you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor does exist, and finding them is easy with Zocdoc. Zocdoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. Talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering over 200 specialties from primary care, dentistry, dermatology, eye care, and a whole lot more. Zocdoc makes the process simple. You can search by specialty or symptoms and actually build a care team that works for you. You can also read verified patient reviews so you feel confident choosing a doctor that you'll actually like. And whether you want to go in person or do a video visit, Zocdoc makes it easy either way. So stop putting off those doctor appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor that you'll love today. That's Zocdoc, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to Zocdoc for sponsoring this show and this message. I also want to tell you about the title sponsor of this show, which is FanDuel. You ever want to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel's giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board, thinking about which teams can make a deep run, perfect time to lock it in. Futures this time of year is always fun. You're picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. So are you rocking with OKC? Are you rocking with San Antonio? Are you rocking with other? That's on you. Now, not only can you pick your cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Wanted to continue to talk about Robbie Leonard as a defensive coordinator. And, you know, it's so funny when I saw that he was getting an interview, a lot of people thought, oh, that's just a courtesy interview. And I really thought that there was a chance he can get the defensive coordinator position. One, I think it helps bring continuity to this team. And I understand that he's a first-time DC. He hasn't had that experience, but he's been in the game for a very long time, like coaching like 13, 15 years, right? So, I mean, he's had plenty of coaching experience. And the one thing I've always respected about Robbie Leonard, being there at practice, being there at training camp, being able to see him, talk to him, interact with them, I understand how he's able to get so much out of his players. And I know that you could look at it and say, well, the Raiders defense hasn't been that great, so what has he done? Well, he's worked with some dudes. He's worked with Max, obviously, but K'Lavon Chaisson, you saw what he did this year in New England. He really had a really good year last year when he came over, when the Raiders picked him up off of waivers. Chaisson looked good. Kuntz looked good at the end of 2023. Obviously, he tore his ACL in 24, and this year was kind of a wash on him. But Jonah Laulu came in and immediately played well. J.J. Pegues, Tonka Hemingway, rookies this year, they did well. I know Tyree Wilson hasn't quite developed yet, but even when he had Christian Wilkins for a handful of games, he did some good things with him. He's a guy that these players, they'll run through a wall for. They really will. And his intensity, the way that he gets them just to really compete at every single station when they go station to station, when they're there at training camp. And you could ask the players, and you'll hear from the players what he means to them and what he's able to get from them. He's a guy that I felt for a while was going to be a defensive coordinator sooner rather than later, whether it was with the Raiders or someone else. And he was actually a guy that for the last couple of years has been requested by other teams, and the Raiders have blocked him. They've blocked that move because they wanted to hold on to him, and now not only did they hold on to him, but now they elevated him and promoted him. So he's been an outside linebackers coach with the Baltimore Ravens. He was there in Miami, linebackers coach and assistant defensive line coach for Miami, and the New York Giants. He's been in that organization as well. Again, he's just a guy that's got some skins on the wall. And the fact that he's learned from Mike Macdonald, the fact that he's learned from Brian Flores, who are two really good defensive coordinators. Obviously, Mike Macdonald, Super Bowl champ there in Seattle now, really good head coach as well. I'm not saying, and a lot of people think, oh, well, it's going to be Patrick Graham's defense all over. I don't think it is. I can't tell you. I'd be lying to you if I told you exactly what his scheme was going to be. But I do believe that it's going to be a blend of what we see from Mike Macdonald, a blend of what we see from Brian Florence. Like all his influences that he had, I feel like he's going to kind of make it and build his own kind of identity and put his own thumbprint and his own twist to it, which I think is okay. And again, as a first-time DC, it may be a little new for him. He may have a couple minutes here and there where he's like, man, I wish I could have had that back or that play call. There's going to be some bumps on the road, right? Everything's not going to be just roses and puppy dogs and rainbows, right? I mean, because that's just when it's something brand new anyway, and that's going to go for the head coach as well, right? I mean, the head coach goes from being an OC to all of a sudden now being the CEO, and now Robbie Leonard goes from being the D-line coach to being the D coordinator. So everyone answers to him, right? Whether that's the defensive pass game coordinator, the secondary coach, the defensive line coach, all these guys, the safeties coordinator, like all these guys are going to be reporting to him. Linebackers coach, they've got a lot of staff that they still got to put together. And, having some experience there, even Dave Camilla, the special teams coordinator, having that guy that's had that much experience in the league, that's going to help Robbie Leonard as well. So they're all going to kind of grow together. But, again, this is a guy that all the players swear by, just like Max always, talks about different coordinators and coaches that he's worked with, and he's been able to get a lot. Like he always talks about Rod Marinelli. That's when he really kind of started to open up his game with the Raiders is when Marinelli was coaching him up. And remember Unique and Ngakoue, him and Unique were going back and forth that one year. Every time he got a sack, Unique had to get a sack. They were, kind of running buddies. Well, I think that Robbie Leonard could do the same thing. I think he can do a really good job with the defensive coordinator position. I like the fact that he's young. Kubiak's young, Janoko's young. All those guys, like I said before, and I said in segment number 1, they have an opportunity to grow together. But this, to me, was a really good move, and especially since they have been blocking him for a couple years from getting other jobs. And they've seen him and identified him as a coach that they want to have around for a long time. And now for him to get those flowers and get the rewards and get a promotion, I think it's a well-deserved promotion. I know some people are kind of on the fence about it just because they don't know. But trust and believe, from everything I've seen at practice and everything I've seen at training camp, this dude gets it. This dude understands it, and this dude is really he's been really the heartbeat of the Raiders defensive coaching staff. Like, I know Patrick Graham was the coordinator, but I feel like Robbie Leonard was kind of the guy that really did all the communicating with the players. He was really the guy that got everything cooking, everything going. And it's similar to when AP was the linebackers coach. He knew all those players really well because he always communicated with them. He talked to them a lot. That's why when he took over in 2023, he kind of knew what buttons to push and how to get the most out of these guys because he was pretty close with them. I see similarities there with Robbie Leonard. Again, he's going to have to learn. Right, there's going to be some moments where he's going to want back, obviously, but I think that this is going to be a good thing moving forward. I also believe that this lets you know, as we've been saying before, this is not one of those where the Raiders think it's going to be an overnight success. All of a sudden, they're going to turn it around in 1 year and be a 14-win team next year. They're going to allow this thing to build and allow this thing to grow and allow this thing to hopefully get going in the right direction. So again, go back to sustained success. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for playoffs in 2016 and then playoffs again in 2021. And that's it. You know what I mean? Like, they're looking to be a team that once they get to the playoffs, they're consistently in the playoffs. And they're trying to grow this thing all together. Look at what they did in Tampa Bay when the roster got turned over after Tom Brady and company won the Super Bowl, and that roster got turned over as a very young roster. I believe that's what this team is going to look like. A lot of young dudes out there playing this year as opposed to what we saw last year. And you're going to see some of these young coaches growing with the players as well. But hats off to Robbie Leonard, now the defensive coordinator. And a lot of people talk about, well, did they just do that to try to save Max and keep Max happy? I don't think it hurts, right? And that's why I haven't talked about it that much. I don't think it hurts in the efforts to keep Max Crosby, but it's not the only reason why they put him in that position is just because of that relationship he has with Max Crosby. But like I said, it's sure not going to hurt because Max has a ton of respect for Rob Leonard. So that's just another little side note. And that could, it could end up helping influence Max and what he does, but I don't think it's going to be the end-all, be-all. Like, it's not just one coach is all of a sudden going to make, Max Crosby say, all right, now I want to stay with the team because Robbie Leonard's that guy. No, I mean, he's going to go somewhere or he's going to either stay with the Raiders or go somewhere where he feels like he could win. Just straight up. That's what it's going to ultimately be when it's all said and done. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts will close out the show. 707-654-4693. We'll hear from you next. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor we have here on the show, and that is TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every single deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling everything. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. That's coming up pretty quick. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, do want to thank you so much for making this the first listen of the day. Off top, we got a call from Raider X. He's calling to talk about the Raiders' promotion of Rob Leonard to DC and has a very important question. Here's Raider X.
This is Raider X. Just wanted to call quick and sweet. It looks like we can put those rumors of Max Crosby going afar. Now we have signed Robbie Leonard and promoted him. So it looks, obviously, we can't, rule out something, spectacular. However, it looks like done deal records. That Max and Robbie Leonard in the future of the Raiders, at least on that side of the ball, will be in good hands. because the relationship's there, the continuity is there. Keeping some familiar faces on that side of the ball is great. Just one last question, and of great importance. Who are we going to sign for the offensive line coordinator? That is right now the backbone of this overall offense and the rebuild of this team. We get this right, we're cooking with grease. Raider X out.
X-Man, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Promoting Robbie Leonard won't hurt in the efforts to keep Max, as I mentioned in segment number 2. It won't be the end-all, be-all, though, right? You know, they do have a great relationship, and that's good. But like I said, it's not going to be the end-all, be-all. It won't hurt their situation. As far as the O-line coach, that's the million-dollar question. That's the million-dollar hire, right? It's not going to be John Benton. He's staying in Seattle. This is going to be the most important hire as far as I'm concerned. This is the one that you really look at and you celebrate. Again, they're bringing the zone blocking scheme, and it's not something that the Raiders do very well or have ever done very well. They need a really good offensive line coach. They need a really good offensive line teacher, and they need the personnel to be able to fit with what they're trying to do. That is going to be critical. That is the hire that I'm really focused in on 100%. So thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Enrique in the 909. It says, hey, Q, what's up? It's Enrique for the 909. It's been a while since I've hit y'all up, but I think today is time. I got to give a shout out to Ari and you for a great job that y'all do. Keep us up to date with all things Raiders. I just want to say that Coach Kubiak got here to work, no joke, and is putting together a staff of coaches that may not have flashy names, but I'm hoping is best fit. I just want to know a little bit more about the hire of defensive line coach Matt Robinson, how good a hire he is. Hope all is well. Have a great rest of the week, and go Raiders. That's from Enrique in the 909. Yeah, I got to do some deep diving on the Matt Robinson. I don't even want to lie to you and act like I know exactly what he brings to the table, but I thought it was pretty interesting that he was in Baltimore with John Harbaugh. He was in New York with the Giants with John Harbaugh, and then all of a sudden, you know, Klint Kubiak comes calling, and he decides he wants to make a move to Vegas to become the secondary coach. I think that that's a big deal. I also think it's a big deal because Rob Leonard spent time in Baltimore under Mike McDonald. So you can kind of start to see the influences that are all coming together and having those Baltimore ties. So I do feel like this defense is going to be a lot of what you see from Mike McDonald, what you saw in Baltimore before he left for Seattle, and also the Brian Flores influence as well, because Robbie Leonard worked there. So I'll continue to do some researching and get you some more details and exactly what Robinson brings to the table. But I don't think it's a bad thing if John Harbaugh was trying to keep him on staff and then he decided to make the move to be with the Raiders. Thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Doug. He's calling to talk about the hire of Robbie Leonard as DC and shares his thoughts on it. Here's Raider Doug.
Hey, Q. This is Raider Doug in Cali. Appreciate the show. Ari, thank you for everything that you do for the show. First listen of the day, every day. Real quick, I heard, the news about Rob Leonard as well as some of the other guys from the current staff being put on the defensive side of the unit, specifically defensive coordinator for Rob Leonard. Personally, I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm just right in the middle about it. Rob, I've always heard is a good coach. But for me as a fan, perception-wise, I never really understood the hype personally. Max has done well in the system, but everybody else has been okay. Malcolm Kuntz had a good year. Not even a good year, a good month in 2023. But prior to that and after that, it's always been nothing to be heard of. And same with some other players. There's glimpses here and there. I'm not really sure what to expect. I think the only positive I can put out of this is that he's an unknown. So I'm rooting for the guy. I'm hoping that maybe this is his calling and the Raiders pick a good defensive coordinator. But I personally would like somebody with a little more experience, or at least from a unit that did really well in the past. So let me know your thoughts, Q. Go Raiders.
Doug, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. I think he'll be good, right? Based off what he's been able to do. I feel like he really helped keep that unit together when Max and Christian Wilkins went down. Remember, Wilkins went down after 5 games, and then Max went down, after 12? They shut him down. So I think he's developed some guys. I think you saw some from Tonka Hemingway and J.J. Pegues last year. They didn't get a whole lot of burn, but, Pegues, or Tonka Hemingway, I should say, had, 4 sacks in, 4.5 games, 5 games, whatever the case may be. I think that those guys, will start to come together under Robbie Leonard. I think all these guys are going to start to help. But again, the proof is going to be in the pudding, right? I mean, you got to go out there and you got to do it. I could talk about how I think it's a good hire. You could talk how you think it's not a good hire. At the end of the day, it's what they do. Go out there and get these guys going. Now, he hasn't been able to develop Tyree Wilson. That could be a Tyree Wilson thing. That could be they just haven't figured out how to use him. I don't know. But Tyree still hasn't turned into the guy that any of us expected him to be when he was drafted number 7 overall. But thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Got time for a couple more. This text comes from Mountaineer Raiders. So what's up, Q? Big offseason for the Raiders coming up. I'm pretty sure everyone is in agreement that we need to draft Mendoza with the first pick. But what if we aren't able to address the offensive line of free agency? Just because we have all this cap space and offer players big contracts doesn't mean they're going to accept to come to Vegas. If we have a similar situation with the O-line next year as we did this year, do we really want to put a rookie quarterback in that situation, or do we trade back and stockpile some draft capital? Love the show, Q. Appreciate everything you guys do. That's Mountaineer Raider. Thanks for the text. That's a great question, right? Because that's a reality. Maybe these guys don't take the big money that the Raiders will offer them in free agency. I think they will, but what if they don't, right? You always have to think about what's next if that doesn't happen. Well, then, you try to put your offensive line together the best way you can. I mean, you do have offensive linemen right now, in the building that you could work with. Remember, you still have Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant that you drafted last year and really didn't get to see much of. Saw more Caleb Rogers, didn't get to see much Charles Grant at all, right? You got Colton Miller, you got JPJ. I think you can kick Charles Grant in the inside, but, they do need to make sure that offensive line is put in place. I would still draft a quarterback. You don't have to play him right away, right? I mean, remember that. You don't have to, just because he's drafted number 1 overall, and most quarterbacks do play right away when they're drafted number 1 overall, doesn't mean he has to. Right? It just means that he's drafted number 1 overall. You have a chance to get your quarterback right now. And I know you can trade back, get some extra draft capital, and then try to do it again next year. But what if you're not in position? What if you win too many games and all of a sudden you're on the outside looking in of all the quarterbacks? Are you going to use that draft capital that you just got to trade back up? Well, then you're hustling backwards, right? I mean, why collect a lot of draft capital and then all of a sudden just give it right back, right? It's like me when I'm on the triple double diamond there at the casino. Right? You put $100 in and then you win and then you keep playing and then you give it all back. That don't make no sense. I've done that. My bad. But you know what I mean? Like when you're supposed to win, you're supposed to cash out. Right? And so I just don't see why you would trade back, get capital, and then if you're in a bad position, you're not sitting there at number 1 overall or number, top 3, top 4 or whatever, then all of a sudden you have to use that same capital that you just collected to get back in a position to get a quarterback. So I think Fernando Mendoza is a winner. I think he's a guy that would really help this Raiders franchise. And if it's up to me, I'm selecting him number 1 overall. That's just it. So thanks so much for the text. Do appreciate you. And we'll close things out with a call from Jay in Akron. He's calling to talk about the Raiders offensive line, the fact that it has to be rebuilt, and gives his thoughts on it. Here's Jay in Akron.
Thank you, Jay in Akron. First-time caller, long-time listener. Listen every day, man. You know ball. You take pride in your work, and it's a pleasure listening to you. So respect that. A lot of people in that game, they don't really know what they're talking about. But I'm calling today to talk about offensive line. I've been listening to the show, and that's been a big topic of conversation both on your show and on the Squad Report with Link. If the Raiders are going to draft Mendoza number 1, then the offensive line has to be rebuilt. That's really priority number 1 aside from the draft. And if you actually look at the Raiders, where they stand right now, they got 5 linemen on multi-year deals, Colton Miller, JPJ, DJ Glaze, Grant, and Rogers. And realistically, 3 of those guys should be backups, right? Glaze, Grant, Rogers. You only have 2 starters, Miller and JPJ. So after that, you basically have to go out and you need 3 starters and probably, honestly, another backup center. And center is honestly the linchpin in this whole thing. So you have to go out and find yourself a center. So a veteran center. You can't go get one in the draft, which means you're either going to get Linderbaum. That's if Baltimore lets him out the door, which would be a huge mistake. Or you have to go find a guy like Luke Fortner, like coming out of New Orleans. So he's a good center. He's not, an all-pro, but he's a good, solid center. You guys have already mentioned Josh Jones from Seattle, who had a good year, but again, he was limited to fit that right tackle spot. That still leaves, if you get both of those guys, if you go get a center and you get a tackle, you still have to go get a guard, right? So there's a couple guards early in the draft that you need to come in and start on day 1. So you go get a young guard, whether that be the Ione kid from Penn State or Pregnon from Oregon. And then all of a sudden you get your 3 starters, and now you have your backups, and all of a sudden you have offensive line that should set things right, be able to run block and pass block and protect Mendoza and give him the best chance of success. All right, Q, out.
Big J, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, look, Linderbaum and Jones, those should be priorities, right? Again, similar to what I said to Mountaineer Raider, you still have Caleb Rogers, you still have Charles Grant. Those are third-round picks from a year ago. You have to probably go out and address the offensive line and get at least 2 starters. I would say 2, at least. I know Lincoln says at least 3, which is fine. I believe Lincoln more than I believe me, right? I mean, Lincoln's the guy that's the offensive lineman, right? He's the guy that did it at a high level, so he knows what he's looking for more than I know what I'm looking for, right? And so I like to listen to guys like him. Maybe Glaze could kick inside the guard. You could put JPJ at another guard spot. You could go and get Linderbaum and Jones. I think Jones would really love to go with the Raiders just to get an opportunity to start, where he's a backup now in Seattle, right? And he's going to be a free agent, so I think you can get him. That's a good start right there. If you can get Linderbaum and Jones, that's a really good start, and then you go from there. If you feel like you have to go out and get a third one, go get a third one if you can, right? If not, you have some pieces that you can play around with and move around and see what you can do. But that offensive line is going to be critical. You have to get that offensive line put in place, and it's got to be there. I think it's got to be there before the draft in April. That's just me, and that's why the offensive line coach, going back to the coaching staff, that's why that's going to be such an important hire when, in fact, Klint Kubiak makes that call. So that's going to do it for today's show. Definitely appreciate all the calls. Appreciate all the texts. We actually have the Raiders Squad show coming up later on this morning. Lincoln Kennedy is going to be actually right where I'm at right now. He'll be here in Studio Q. So it'll be me, Lincoln, and Chantel Chan. And we'll go 7:30 to 8:30, 1 hour long, 1 hour strong on President's Day. Right, so I don't have any radio shows today. My local show, Raider Nation Radio 920, and ESPN's Game Night. I don't do any of those, but we do have the squad show for you to set off your President's Day the right way. So hopefully you'll join us for that as well. And then tomorrow we'll continue to update you on more coaching hires that Klint Kubiak makes. If he, in fact, does make some more, we'll have plenty more to talk about. I had a really good conversation with Gary Kubiak, Klint Kubiak's dad, on Friday on my radio show. And if the Raiders hadn't made so many hires over the weekend, I was actually going to play it today for you. I'll probably play it tomorrow unless there's a lot more that we got to talk about. But it was a really good conversation, get to know the man as opposed to just getting to know the coach. So I think you'll enjoy that as well. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.